All right, if you have recently upgraded or downgraded, whichever way you want to see it, from QuickBooks Desktop into QuickBooks Online, this video is good for you. The other group of people that I would love for this video to be useful for is for folks that maybe are thinking about going from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. So first of all, I have this article, and I'll go ahead and copy and paste that link to the article in the description below, where I kind of explain bullet point by bullet point all the things that you're going to lose in the process of going from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online. So if you have QuickBooks Pro, Premier, Enterprise, or Accountant, and you convert it to QuickBooks Online, there's a whole bunch of things that you would, number one, lose in the process, and number two, features that are not going to be there anymore. So I'll put the link in the description below so you can check that out. The other piece is, if you have not set up your QuickBooks Online account free trial, I'll also put a link to a special link that will give you a 50% discount for the first year that you sign up, and it's actually the best deal in town. So if you haven't set up your QuickBooks Online account, use that link and it'll take you to the setup process. So in this video, let me kind of explain feature by feature the difference between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. And I can't really go into the entire list that I have in the article, for example, just because it would just be a way too long of a video. But let me go overall in a very high level, what's the difference between the two. So first of all, when you first log into QuickBooks Online, this is what it looks like. This is called a dashboard. Basically, it has a couple of graphs here in the front that gives you invoices, expenses, profit and loss, and some balances here on the right hand side. On the QuickBooks Desktop, it's a little bit different. You actually get the home screen with all the icons. You can click on the Insights tab that will give you similar information. I would probably say or argue that part of the inspiration for the QuickBooks Online dashboard probably came from QuickBooks Desktop. In both, you can't really change much. You can change some of the dates. There is a gear button on the desktop where you can pick and choose what you don't want to see. On the online, you can hit the drop down and choose the dates, but you can't really change what these graphs look like. These are just standard graphs that you have to deal with. Now, these balances on the right side of the screen on QuickBooks Online, in QuickBooks Desktop, you can see them by clicking on View Balances. So if you're used to seeing those balances there, you would definitely notice them now on the right-hand side of the dashboard. Now in QuickBooks Desktop, if you use the top icon bar instead of the left icon bar, and we're going to go back to the home page, maybe you're used to seeing the balances here on the right-hand side of the screen. So that will give you an idea more or less how those work. Now I'm going to go into back into the left icon bar so we can compare the left navigation bar in QuickBooks Desktop, which is that big blue bar on the left hand side, and it has a couple of commonly accessed features like income tracker, bill tracker. You have customers, you have vendor, you have employees, reports, that sort of thing. When you go into QuickBooks Online, it's very similar. We got the sales tab that takes me to all of my sales related transactions. You get this here, which is similar to the income tracker. So this right here is called the sales transaction screen. If you go into QuickBooks and you click on income tracker, you're going to also notice that part of the inspiration, the look and feel in QuickBooks Desktop on the income tracker looks a lot like the income tracker in QuickBooks Online. You get a list of all the transactions that comprise of that income. If you click on any of these color buttons, you can filter that. Same thing with QuickBooks Desktop. You can click on any of these and they filter. So those two things are extremely similar. On the same sales tab, you can click over to invoices, and this invoice section, which is kind of like the income tracker but just solely invoices, that looks very similar in the QuickBooks Desktop world. So if I click on customers and then I click here where it says transactions and then click on invoices, I would get to a similar sort of invoice listing type of screen. Now, if I actually click on customers, that's what in QuickBooks Online, this would be the customer center, which has all the customer information and open balances. That would be similar as clicking on customers here. And I'm going to close the left navigation bar to give me a little bit more real estate and organize the screen here. So if I click on any of these customers, it will show me here on the right hand side the history of all the transactions related to that customer, and it will work the same way in QuickBooks Online. So if I click on any of these particular customers, I will see the history within that customer. So from that perspective, those two things are very similar. There's the little tab icon there that opens up the customer center, so I can see my left navigation bar, my list of customers, and then all the detail of each customer. And that little option there that opens and closes makes it even more similar to QuickBooks Desktop, because you get the left navigation bar, the customer list, and all the transactions related to it. Now, so that's pretty much all the stuff in their sales. There's a tab here called Products and Services, which in the QuickBooks Desktop world, it says it's called Item List. So if I click on Item List there, it will take me to the list of all the items, which are the products and services that I buy and sell. If I click on any of those items, it will take me to the Edit Item screen, where I can select the item name, description, price, and account. And it will work the same way in QuickBooks Online. If I click on Edit on any of them, it takes me to a similar screen where I can change the name, the account, and price associated with it. So from that perspective, it's just very similar. I can make a duplicate here in QuickBooks Online, and then if I'm in QuickBooks Desktop, I could also right-click and duplicate. So the item list would be very similar from that perspective, although in QuickBooks Desktop, there's a lot more features related to inventory. Let me click on the expenses tab here in QuickBooks Online, and that will take me to all my expense transactions. QuickBooks Desktop doesn't have anything really similar to that. There's this option called the bill tracker, which actually shows me purchase orders, bills, and stuff like that. But in here, it shows me all expense transactions. So from that perspective, I think this expense transactions tab is actually kind of an edge. It's a little bit better than QuickBooks Desktop. Closest thing to that will be clicking on vendors and then clicking on transactions. Let me minimize this. And then clicking on checks, and then you can see all the checks for all the vendors across the board. Or I can click on credit card activity, and I can see all the credit card activity with all the vendors across the board, and then bills, and I can see them all. But in QuickBooks Online, they're sort of all lumped together, which is actually a really cool thing. So I would say this particular feature is better in QuickBooks Online. Now, if I click on vendors, this will take me to my vendor center. Up here, you see this bar where I can click on purchase orders, open bills. That would be what the bill tracker would be like. So if I click on bill tracker, that would be very similar to this. I would probably argue that the functionality, it's pretty much identical. So that could be vendors bill tracker. That's right there. So you got the bill tracker and the vendor center all sort of splice into one. If I click on any of these specific vendors, it will take me to the history of that vendor. So that would be the equivalent of me clicking on vendors, or here, vendor center. So it'll be the equivalent of me doing that and going into the vendor center and then going into vendors. Let me minimize this again. And clicking on any specific vendor and seeing all the history of that specific vendor. That would be the same thing as here. Now there's this little tap button here, just like in the customer side, where I can open up the vendor list, and then that would make it a lot similar to QuickBooks Desktop. So that's what that vendor list looks like. Now, if I click on workers and employees, that would be similar to going into employees, an employee center. Now, the experience in QuickBooks Desktop versus QuickBooks Online in payroll is very, very similar. QuickBooks Desktop's a lot more powerful when it comes to paychecks and job costing and stuff like that. But that would be the closest we can get to the employee center would be that workers employees tab. Now, when I click on reports, the experience in QuickBooks Online is actually pretty neat. It's very visual, very easy to work with. The way the closest thing to that reports tab would be the report center, which is a feature in QuickBooks Desktop that I actually don't use a lot, just because it takes a while to load. So as you can see, I just clicked on it. It takes a while to load, and you have all the reports in QuickBooks Desktop have this sort of visual preview, and you can't and they are organized by category. So I think QuickBooks Desktop's a lot better when it comes to this report center. if I go to any specific report, so for example, I'm going to go into the profit and loss. The interface is similar. We have date range, we have columns by, we have comparing to a previous period, switching from cash to accrual, and the customize button that allows me to do some light customization. In QuickBooks Desktop, let me pull up a profit and loss report just so you can get an idea more or less. We have the date range, we have the cash and accrual toggle. We can click on customize report and we can do the comparative periods. Okay, so all that stuff is available. Where really makes a huge difference is in this filters tab, where you see all these fields that we can do filters for. And then if I actually go to filter here, notice that I'm extremely limited in what fields I can filter in QuickBooks Online, which actually takes me to one of the most important pieces of the differences between the two. In the surface, it looks like they're the same in terms of the basic reports, profit and loss, balance sheet, and that sort of thing. But when it comes to customizing reports, QuickBooks Desktop is leagues away from QuickBooks Online, just much more powerful, a lot more functions. But the look and feel is very similar. You can save customized reports in QuickBooks Online. You can also click on Memorize and do the same thing in QuickBooks Desktop. So functionality wise, they're very head to head with those reports, but that's the key component in terms of customization. That's going to be much better in the desktop side. When I click on taxes, that will take me to sort of like the payroll taxes and sales taxes. In this case, only sales taxes are enabled. In QuickBooks Desktop, we have sales taxes as well. Okay, so we have the sales tax center and we have very similar functionality. I would still say QuickBooks Desktop is a little bit more powerful, but QuickBooks Online is bringing in some automated rate calculation and stuff like that. That's going to make it in the long run a lot more powerful. When I click on accounting, that's going to take me to my chart of accounts. My chart of accounts in QuickBooks Online is searchable. I can create accounts, I can delete accounts, I can merge accounts, I can reconcile. We have running balances in here. It's going to be very similar in QuickBooks Desktop. So if I click on the chart of accounts, I have all my accounts here. I can search, I can edit any of these accounts and change the type, the description, just like I can do here under the QuickBooks Online. Notice like I have about the same functionality. QuickBooks Desktop has the register balance, but QuickBooks Online has both the downloaded bank balance and the QuickBooks balance. So that gives you a little bit of an edge. But on it all, the chart of accounts is actually a very similar feature. When you go to reconcile, that's going to be a lot different. I actually like the reconciliation feature in QuickBooks Online better. Let me just show you real quick what that looks like. So you get debits and credits sort of on the same line, and you have one check mark for both, where in QuickBooks Desktop, the experience is a little bit more sort of old style. So if I go to reconcile, for example, I'm just going to pick a date here. I have to reconcile my checks on the left and my deposits on the right. And it is just a little bit old school when it comes to that perspective. It works really well on desktop, but I really like the way QuickBooks Online combined the two into just the same lines. And I can filter them. So I could just show payments, reconcile that. I can just show deposits, reconcile that. And you also get something that you don't get with desktop, which is a clear date. And the clear date is awesome. If you're downloading things from the bank and the check's clear, you'll be able to know by comparison the difference between the actual check date and the clear date. So I find those two things to be just particularly better in QuickBooks Online. So let's go on to the Quick Create button. This is where you can find all the transactions, invoices, estimates, sales receipts. I mean, you find that stuff here as well. So if I click on customers, I can see invoices, sales receipts, estimates. So all that stuff is in there. The one area that's worth noting is that QuickBooks Online doesn't have sales orders and QuickBooks Desktop does. So that's actually one of the major features in QuickBooks Desktop, especially for inventory people. That makes a huge difference. But in terms of those basic functions, invoices, estimates, and sales receipts is pretty much identical. One place where QuickBooks Desktop really stands out is the customization of the overall look and feel of the invoice. So there is some editable functionality in QuickBooks Online where you can change a little bit of the look and feel of the invoices, but just QuickBooks Desktop, it's just way more powerful. So I'm going to open up an invoice real quick to show you. So I'm going to go to Invoice, and then I'm going to go to Formatting and Customize Data Layout and the Layout Designer. So you got this full designer feature where I can move around some of these boxes and I can customize specifically where all these things are. So it's actually a lot more powerful in the QuickBooks Desktop tool, because in QuickBooks Online I really can't move anything around. I can change the color of the look and feel, and I can add or remove some fields and some margins, but I don't have the amount of flexibility in terms of overall controlling the look and feel of the printed forms in QuickBooks Online as I have in QuickBooks Desktop. So a couple of things worth noting. In the QuickBooks Online side, we can collapse that left navigation bar by clicking on those three lines, just like we can do it on the desktop side. Okay, so you can see we can collapse those two. If I click on the gear menu and then account and settings, I have a lot of preferences that I can tweak and change in the account and settings. It's not as powerful as QuickBooks Desktop though, but this is where we go to change all the options that I want to turn off and on. Same thing in QuickBooks Desktop. I go to edit preferences, and then I go through all the different preferences here and turn things off and on. I'm not going to get into the specifics about what's different in the settings, but that's more or less navigationally how you would get to that. Now, the search feature in QuickBooks Online is just much more powerful and better, because when you click on search, you get a full search box, and then you have a recent transactions list, something you really don't get with QuickBooks Desktop. If you go to edit and find, you do have a really powerful advanced find feature where you can run a lot of filters and look for transactions. But QuickBooks Online as well, if I click on advanced search, notice that I can search by any of these criteria: transaction type, reference. Notice I have tons of criteria. If I click on add filter, and I can add more criteria, date range, and things like that. So there is just a lot of things that we can search in the search box. Now, in terms of what you have access to, notice that you have just a few fields that you can access. You have all the transaction types and then a few fields. With QuickBooks Desktop, it feels like there are more filters and more options for searching and dissecting data. But I think in practical matters, I think I found the QuickBooks Online search to be just faster for most of the things that we're searching. And of course, that recent transactions list, it's just really awesome. QuickBooks Desktop doesn't give you that. I mean, there is a report called, where is it? The journal. So if you go to accounting and taxes and journal, it will show you all the most recent transactions, but it just feels a lot more cumbersome because it's more of a report than the drop down that shows me all the recent transactions. Now in the gear menu, we can do other things like going into our attachments, our recurring transactions, QuickBooks Labs, which will be all the new things that they add along the way, budgeting and import data. Now QuickBooks Desktop, when it comes to Accountant Edition and Enterprise, it's just miles away in terms of functionality with data import. QuickBooks Desktop has tons of great things like batch enter. The batch reclassify feature in QuickBooks Desktop is better. We have batch void and delete. We have batch merge. Just QuickBooks Desktop, hands down, just more powerful on the import side. QuickBooks Online does have a couple of import features, like you can import customer list, vendor list, accounts, and products and services, something that QuickBooks Desktop has been able to do forever. But the single most important thing when comparing the two, and where they're really truly different, is on the banking side. QuickBooks Online banking is extremely powerful. The bank rules are also extremely powerful. QuickBooks Desktop does have the bank feeds feature, where you can go and deal with some of the transactions that get downloaded through the bank. But the interface it's a little bit outdated. It's a little bit clunky. The rules, there are rules. You can actually create some of the rules, but the rules are very limited in terms of what you can use to discriminate and dissect data in terms of automatically classifying things. This is the one place, hands down, QuickBooks Online has just much stronger personality or functionality than desktop. And I just think that it'll continue being that way. That may be the edge that QuickBooks Online will always have on QuickBooks Desktop. Now, adding users in QuickBooks Online, click here on Manage Users, is extremely easy. You don't need to install anything. QuickBooks Online Essentials gives you 3 users right off the bat. QuickBooks Online Plus gives you 5 users right off the bat, plus 2 accountants. And you can add, and for a little bit extra fee, up to 25 users. With QuickBooks Desktop, adding users usually means you have to buy a new license. If you're working with enterprise, I mean, this gets pretty costly. One thing that is just important to point out, the users feature in QuickBooks Desktop, it's a lot more powerful, especially when it comes to QuickBooks Enterprise. So when you're editing the functionality of what you can access and what you can't access in QuickBooks Enterprise is extremely comprehensive, has a lot of moving parts in terms of what you can tell QuickBooks to give the user access to or not, where QuickBooks Online is just really weak in that area. When you create a user, I'm going to create a custom user, for example, there's only really limited functionality. You can say, yes, the user can have access to customers or vendors, and really that's it. So there's really no comparison when it comes to the user functionality of QuickBooks Desktop and Online. So just really important, pull the article here. Please visit this article. I list bullet point by bullet point every single difference between QuickBooks Desktop and Online, especially for folks transferring over and converting over. And I need you to go through that list before you do the conversion. Make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Make sure you know what you're losing. I also do list kind of like great things about QuickBooks Online, like it's cloud-based, more powerful bank feeds, easy multi-user access, easy accountant access, easy collaboration, mobile app support, which we didn't mention. QuickBooks Online has some great virtues, but if you are converting from QuickBooks Online to QuickBooks Desktop, I can certainly see why you would have some anxiety about understanding the differences and understanding on whether or not you should do such a conversion. So hopefully you like this video. Hit like, add some comments below, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. Let me know if this was complete. Let me know if this is the type of video that you'd like to see in the future. What else would you like to see in terms of comparing the two platforms? Thanks.